Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tiffany Dow, Black Collegians Counselor. Welcome to Cultivating Safe Spaces and Belonging for African American and Latinx Students. Savannah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Silvana Carrion Palomares, and I am the NSF Project Manager and a co-collaborator with Direct Connect.
Awesome. Shantae DeLoach is not able to attend today. However, we wanted to acknowledge her as a part of the Direct Connect team and know that she is here in spirit with us. We also want to acknowledge the horrid hate crimes and stand in solidarity and support of our Asian descent faculty, staff, and students here at Santa Monica College and all across the nation. So coming back to the title here for Cultivating Safe Spaces and Belonging, I really want to highlight the title Cultivate. It's the act of caring, supporting, and nurturing our African American and Latinx students inside and outside of the classroom. But this is a very crucial time to begin or to enhance or to readdress how we support our students. Savannah, Shantae, and I wanted to contribute to this critical, authentic dialogue around safe spaces and belonging for African American Latin students at SMC. We have an amazing panel, which I consider our frontline advocates, accomplices, and allies for our most vulnerable students. Now, due to our full presentation, we ask that you place any questions or comments in the chat box. We will try our best to provide an opportunity to answer questions at the end. Sorry, Savannah.
So just to set intentions for our presentation, we want to humanize African American and Latinx experiences in academia and non-academic spaces at SMC. We want to offer theoretical and practical perspectives on cultivating safe spaces and a sense of belonging, and promote Direct Connect and equity-centered access navigation tool. And as Tiffany said, we will be having a panel of our frontline staff that really helps, cultivate these spaces and really apply the sense of belonging to our students, particularly when it comes to African American and Latinx experiences.
Savannah, I was just going to add to really just speaking to this concept of humanize, just really focusing on the piece that our students enter Santa Monica College, our classrooms, our offices whole. These are whole students, whole beings, and that we do need to embrace all of the intricate parts of our students, right? And that the theoretical piece is important to lay the foundation, but the practical piece is just as important, right? So just wanted to emphasize that part. Thank you.
Thank you, Tiffany.
So I wanted to start off with this picture here at SMC. And I've now been at Santa Monica College now for, 15 years. And I always wanted to be at Santa Monica College, specifically Santa Monica College. As we all know, it has this prestigious reputation. And one of the most common ones, one of our #1 brands is California's #1 transfer college, right? But we want to continue to, of course, have pride in that and acknowledge that. But I do want to pose the question here, who is responsible for SMC becoming the #1 college for African American and Latinx student success, both from an academic and social lens? So as we're thinking about the responsibility of our African American Latinx students, we must understand that this is a campus-wide responsibility. Addressing historic and systemic educational racial inequities of African American Latinx students is a collective responsibility. So as we look at this list of administrators, faculty, staff, and students, it is so crucial and important that we are all equity-minded. I want to emphasize too that we all are at various levels of understanding and experiences with equity. However, we are in the perfect environment to learn, grow, and move forward to an equity-centered campus. And I think that's very important for us to understand. But also that this cannot be just an equity initiative or a checkbox that we're checking off as being done. This is a transformative movement that we must all complete together.
When we talk about historic and systemic educational inequities in both social and academic spaces, we are discussing the unequal distribution of resources and how communities, particularly communities of color, are socially excluded and systemically excluded from access that creates those disparities. So when we talk about academics, we talk about the under-resourced schools, the lack of academic preparation, and sometimes the poor teaching qualities that occur. When we talk about the social, we talk about the lack of access to key resources, networks, and agents. And when we talk about the cultural, we talk about the lack of representation in our institutional agents, whether that be representation in the classroom, in our posters, in the spaces that we hold. And when we talk about the outcomes, we're talking about the feelings of being marginalized, isolated, and alienated, which were some of the topics that were even discussed earlier today with our keynote speakers. And right now, in order to attain student success, particularly for Black and Brown students, we must confront and address those inequities. Now we're starting to see shifts in higher education culture to address the individual and systemic historic shortfalls with legislation, policy, funding, focusing on the root of those causes. So we see access with the University of California system elimination of standardized testing, where that gains a lot more access for people who are of color, and it gives them more agency to be able to advocate and get into these institutions. When we look at the California State AB 1460 ethnic studies law, that is really infusing multicultural democracy into just the teaching policies and what students should be focusing on as well. And when we look at California Community College Chancellor seat, which is a lot of the funding that we use ourselves, it's the funding source that advances historically underserved Black and Latinx students. So we're seeing this big shift, not just within our college, but with really like California as a whole moving towards this, and even within the country.
So briefly, I wanted to go over a very important model, and I think it's very timing as far or great timing in regards to who we just saw as our keynote speaker, Dr. Frank Harris and Luke Wood, who actually created this model. And as we're thinking about student success, we've always had a traditional way of looking at student success. And I think it's very important that as we really look at student success and what it really means, really looking at the factors, the specific factors that play a role in African-American Latinx student success. As we all know, there's an abundance of research and evidence-based practices to increase African-American Latinx student success. But what are those core components that as practitioners and as faculty, we need to really be intentional about understanding, but also implementing in various spaces? So here to the left, you'll see the inputs, very important. And we'll talk a little bit about Direct Connect later on, but we also looked at these different models as well to inform our design and what we wanted to focus on as well. So looking at the backgrounds, the student backgrounds, societal factors, you can see the list of areas there. But also when we look into the domains, we're looking at both the interpersonal components, as well as the academic and external components that our students experience when they come on campus, right? So when we look at our non-cognitive, we're looking at the interpersonal, intrinsic, and identity factors of our students. For academic, we're looking at specifically, which is very important for our community college students, the faculty and student engagement. So we know that community college students spend the majority of their time in the classroom primarily. However, in addition to the classroom, we know that the support and the connections are also very important, so that engagement. And then we look at our environmental factors. So all the other external responsibilities our students experience, from their family responsibilities, work, their financial obligations, and how that plays a role in their stress or how they're experiencing not only their own personal lives, but even here at Santa Monica College. And then the campus ethos piece is also very important. And again, it goes back to that validation that we were just talking about, right? And that Dr. Rendell will talk about tomorrow as well. But the importance of validating our students, affirming our students, this feeling of a sense of belonging from our faculty and our staff, connections to the campus, as well as the campus resources and access. And all of this too speaks to direct connect as well. And what we, again, design in a way that really highlights some of these essential pieces that support our students of color. Additionally, I just wanted to add here that these are things that we all should be thinking about, right? When we are looking at our classrooms and we're looking at our roles and our positions on campus, how do we factor these particular areas into our designs for our classes or for initiatives that we are creating as well for our students?
So if we think about the deeper consciousness and intention, James Baldwin has this great quote that says, "The paradox of education is precisely this, that as one begins to become conscious of one's beginnings, to examine the society in which he is being educated." And what this quote really examines is that as we're learning all of the terminology that is brought onto us in college and our college experiences, we also start to see how that college itself manifests, that our students are being aware of, do they belong? Are they welcomed here? Are they approached here? Do they have a sense of being able to find themselves in these institutions where we're asking them to definitely come to? We promote our institutions to tell them that we're going to welcome students, but are we doing enough to making sure that we're not just bringing them in, but we're also letting them succeed within our institutions? And that's things that students really begin to examine as they enter the college and universities as a whole.
So, since the primary focus of our presentation today is on safe spaces and sense of belonging, we wanted to make sure that we were able to have some time to define what safe spaces are, which then really supports this feeling and sense of belonging and community for African American and Latinx students. Harper and Quaid talk about safe spaces specifically as shared experiences and interests that foster community, identity and culture that is acknowledged, celebrated, and integrated throughout campus, validation that affirms our students' strengths, voices, and culture, family that nurtures and provides culturally relevant spaces that illuminate authentic community, and representation of Black and Brown faculty, staff, and administrators that are a positive and empowering image, and influence on our African American and Latinx students.
And a sense of belonging and community for Black and Latinx students across campus values the identity and intersectionality as being essential. So it's the social support, the connectedness, the mattering, being accepted, being respected, and being valued. So we're defining a sense of belonging and community when students are welcome to bring the important parts of their identities and lives to us as a college and organization, rather than asking them to leave those identities at the door. So we're appreciating the students' backgrounds as an asset.
So we wanted to share some really awesome quotes that we were provided by institutional research, just to share the sentiments of really illuminating our students' voices. One of the primary challenges that we find, especially with data, is that we do have a little bit more of an emphasis on quantitative data, on the stats, and on the numbers, right? And that does help us with, identifying trends, right? And patterns, very important. But it's also very important to hear the narratives, to hear the stories, and to illuminate our student voices. And so we have Black Collegians, Latino Center, and EOPNS, because what's really amazing about these three programs, and some additional programs as well here at Santa Monica, is that a lot of our Black Collegian students are also a part of the Latino Center and are also a part of EOPNS. And so we all are integrated. And this picture is very reflective of this. At one of our events that we had a couple of years ago, that we're very integrated and interconnected, which is so important and so critical for our students to see those alignments and connections amongst the Black Collegians program, the Latino Center, EOPNS, and other additional specialized programs here at Santa Monica College. So the quote here is, because of Black Collegians Club, I feel a sense of community. Black Collegians is a program that I'm enrolled in to get even more encouraged with the Black community and get the resources and the connections I need to succeed in college. I've heard wonderful things, Black Collegians program. I've heard wonderful things about Black Collegians program and how they give Black students a place to be and the help and support they need. And so I think it's just really important to look at kind of those core pieces, that sense of community, engagement, how they felt engaged, right? That they knew about resources and connections, but also the reputation, right? And how word gets around about various services on campus, whether it's good, it's indifferent, it's bad, but how this is a particular space that students, Black students, feel very safe at, right? And as we spoke about this earlier in our presentation, but I also heard it too in our last presentation with our keynote speakers, is that we cannot only have isolated spaces on campus or specific spaces on campus that our African American and Latinx students go to, that Santa Monica College has to be very intentional in making sure that every area of campus is a safe space, right? And that's something that we have to do collectively.
So we're gonna introduce you guys to our amazing panelists. We'll actually let them introduce themselves. So what they're gonna do is provide an introduction with their name, their position at the college, which you could see here displayed, and one feature about their program that integrates African American or Latinx culture.
Savannah, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just have to say this. We shared this earlier, but I really want to emphasize before these individuals introduce themselves, one, we're very appreciative that they came in and shared their perspectives and their experiences and their narratives, but that they are on the front line. These individuals go above and beyond. I would also say that they really have a keen and clear understanding of our student needs. These individuals know more about our students than I believe anyone else knows, because of the level of investment, time, and effort, genuine and authentic investment they have in our students. They're relatable, personable, and will hold our students accountable. So it's this combination of a family, right, of supporting one another. And so I just want to acknowledge them and acknowledge all of the work and commitment that they provide to our students.
100%. So if you guys want to start.
Oh, I guess it's me. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Savannah and Tiffany, for allowing us to actually come in and speak to our experiences. My name is Aaron De La Torre. I'm the specialist for the EOPS program here at Santa Monica. In terms of how we integrate African American and Latinx culture, I think it starts with the history of EOPS and why it was created. EOPS was signed into California law back in the late 1960s as a result of the civil rights movement, right? So these were a lot of students of both African American and Latinx culture who came in and said that we need these support and services, and really led and drove that for this program to be created. I think for us too, we have mentioned about valuing the stories of what our students bring and what they can bring to our programs. And I think that's something that we center around our policies and procedures. We're constantly pushing and moving and changing, because we understand that, again, for our students, the experience is never the same. And every semester, the needs and wants of our students is constantly changing. And we're always making sure that we center that by surveying our students to figure out what their needs are. It also works with the faculty and staff that we hire, who come from multiple ethnicities and backgrounds, right? Because again, it's also understanding, when we say African American and Latinx, it's also understanding that our students come from multiple cultures and have different traditions. And hiring the staff to be able to connect and build that community and support is something that we definitely value. So thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Christina Fuller and I'm the Student Services Specialist for two of our programs, our Foster Youth Program, Guardian Scholars, and our Undocumented Student Program, DREAM. And so I'll need time just to reflect on both programs periodically. So in regards to a feature in which our program integrates African American and Latinx culture, I was thinking about representation mostly. Um, Tiffany, Dr. Dowd had reflected on data, and I do think that data is important so that we're more informed about who we're actually serving. So in Guardian Scholars, for example, the majority of our students are Black and Latinx. So with that being the case, and understanding that they are former or current foster youth or probation youth, along with being identified as Black or Latinx and having to deal with the multiple things that intersects in their identity and how they navigate on campus and have access to different things is extremely important because it's not just one issue that they're dealing with. So I feel like allowing them to have that space, like Aaron had mentioned, hearing their stories, providing opportunities for them to speak up on behalf of our programs and be represented as a valuable voice is something that we try to do. In regards to the DREAM program, one way that we try to illuminate Latinx culture and Black culture specifically is considering who we have for our guest speakers for our events. So for example, our week of action, just having an open mind that we can have a Latinx speaker or someone from the Black community, and also being mindful of our word choices. So African American might not be appropriate for when we're talking about undocumented students because of the various cultural backgrounds from our students. So just being mindful of those things, I think, is how we try to integrate culture competently.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Edwin Cruz. I'm the Supplemental Instruction Coordinator at SMC. Supplemental Instruction is one of our academic assistance programs at SMC that's offered to all students, where our SI leaders conduct sessions outside of the regular classroom. They cover challenging concepts, ideas from the class, and they also cover organizational techniques, studying, problem-solving techniques that they can take to the classroom and while they're studying and preparing for exams. This is my third week in the position, and so I'm still learning the various duties and responsibilities. But one of my biggest goals is to recruit more African American and Latinx students to be SI leaders and mentors for the future. Prior to being an SI coordinator, I was a math instructional assistant for Adelante and Black Allegiance. And in that capacity, my main duty and responsibility was to provide math tutoring for all subjects to our African American and Latinx students. Furthermore, I was able to facilitate in many of the workshops throughout the year where we would incorporate African American Latinx culture. For example, one of the workshops that I participated in was Hombre a Hombre, along with Dr. Paul Jimenez. And in those workshops, we would cover leadership skills, personal finances. We would cover, things about family, values, beliefs, principles, what it is to be a Latinx male in the 21st century. For example, we discussed the role of machismo in our families, in our friends, and even in the educational system. And so that was really great for our Latinx male students. Another workshop that I got to facilitate in was with Dr. Dowd, which was our math therapy workshops. Our math therapy workshops, the goal was to introduce mindfulness, meditation techniques, along with math techniques to alleviate some of the anxieties that come with taking math classes. And so a lot of our students definitely received a lot of resources with those workshops that they, we received a lot of positive, testimony. And, we showcased that, a lot of meditation teachers, mindfulness gurus are also men and women of color. And so they were able to see that in our workshops.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Janet Tercero and I'm the Student Services Specialist for the Latino Center in Adelante program. So one of the features or the way that we integrate Latinx culture, I think, is through our different workshops. This is how we hold space for our students. Particularly, I do have some examples of some of the workshops that we offer that I think are super important for our students just to connect and share their experiences. We do have a mujer workshop as well. So Edwin talked about the hombre a hombre. So we have a space for women as well, where, you know, the topics that Latinx women, you know, care about are discussed in these workshops as well. At the same as the hombre a hombre, we also have even a space for parents. So we have a Noche de Familia. It's once a month where we invite the parents of our Latinx students to come in and kind of just ask questions about the community college. And so we provide them with different resources. We help educate them as well so that they can then better support you know, their students. Another really big part of our program is that we collaborate with the Adelante Club, and the Adelante Club is one of the student ran clubs or student organizations on campus. And so a lot of the members in our program are also part of this leadership. And so we like to connect and listen to our students. And so we do put on events with them on campus. And some of you may have attended some of them, like Day of the Dead, Dia de los Muertos, Cinco de Mayo celebration. We even had, I think right before the pandemic, we had an Afro-Latinx Heritage Day. And so it was really nice to see everyone out there and kind of, you know, celebrating our different cultures. And then one thing that we recently started, or as of the summer, is that we hired African-American mental health therapist. Her name is Miss Tia Winkler. And I feel like the Black Adelante Healing Circle is a great space for our Black collegians and Adelante students, because her approach is that she wants to provide healing in a decolonized space. And so I think it's especially important to have these kinds of spaces where our students can come in, share their experience about what is affecting them in the outside world. So I think that's also a way that we are able to integrate both our cultures. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jocelyn Nguyen, and I'm the Student Services Specialist for the Black Collegians program. Janet did steal some of the things that I was going to say, so thanks a lot, Janet. But I will state that, you know, I think what we offer at Black Collegians program specifically to our students is, and you know, our program leader, Sherry Bradford, has been really beneficial in being flexible and learning new ways and being very creative on how we actually support our students, specifically in the virtual environment. She was very quick on her toes and kind of changing how our students were dealing with the idea of social distancing. She was very quick to tell our students that social distancing was not a term that we were planning to use, because in Black culture specifically, being physically distant from each other is really problematic, because this is how we really share our love for one another in our culture. And so understanding that it was so important to take that term away from each other. We were going to be physically distanced, but we weren't going to be socially distanced during this process. And I think that has caused a lot of positive support that we've been able to give to our students throughout all of the workshops that we offer. One of the really, I think, really helpful areas that Mrs. Bradford brought up for our students and kind of created for our students, the space that she offers is something called family time. We do family time, not at a specific time. It's a non-agenda kind of meeting that we have with our students. And it's a time for students to just be who they are. You know, one of the things that I struggled with when I first came onto the virtual environment was, you know, allowing the students into my home. I was a big a boundaries person when it came down to my work life and my school life, and my work life and my personal life. And it was really hard for me to let people into my life, into, you know, people seeing what my apartment looks like, people seeing my dog. But I started understanding that, especially in our culture as African-American people, we like to see each other's houses. We want to know what everyone's family looks like. We want to talk about what we cook for dinner and what we've been eating, and the things that we're a part of. And what I notice is that I feel like the relationships we're having with our students become a little bit even more genuine in these spaces when students don't see that disconnect between where we live. They're able to see us living in the true environment of who we are. And I think that the family time has been something that has been a space where students can, they speak about, the things that are going on in the classroom that are problematic for them. They get a chance to, congratulate each other on the victorious things that are happening in their lives. We get a chance to, joke, laugh, even my own personal stuff. I talk about my own personal stuff that's going on. So it's that time where, some students don't have, the time to be with their family, sit it and have dinner together. But we do get a chance to kind of, commune with one another. And that space is, I think in particular, something that has really changed how I've been able to support the students, and even a way that I've been able to get to know my coworkers in a more intimate way. So for me, I think that's the one feature that I'd like to speak to that I thought was really helpful for our students.
So just to be a little bit mindful of time and let our panelists all answer a question, I'm just gonna let whichever one wants to answer this question first can go ahead, and then we'll move on to the next question. So.
Yeah, I can take a stab at it. So the question is, there's a false assumption that students are aware of support services, and how do we create access to students? And I think that access is a big deal. So besides having information like on our web pages or on Instagram to promote the services that we have, I believe in talking about our programs in every space that we have the privilege to be in, whether we're on campus or off campus. I think another thing is assuming that certain students don't need certain information because of biases that might, an individual might have, or, common narratives. So for example, when I meet with students, if we're giving a presentation or if I'm off campus providing information, I like to give info regarding all of our student services programs so that no one is left out of the mix. And I say this because I think it's just a common narrative that all of our undocumented students are Latinx. And so people might not speak about the DREAMer application or the program itself in Black collegians or any other space where there's not as many Latinx people, because, the assumption is you guys don't need to know this information, just things like that we probably take for granted, I think is a major barrier to access to the services that we provide. Not assuming that people aren't foster youth. Maybe someone doesn't want to just come out and say that, but just talk about the stuff so everybody knows what's going on. And then we allow students to have the self-determination to decide, okay, I'll go here, I'll go there. My last soapbox message is that in our program, especially like towards the beginning, we've had about 5 Black undocumented students. And I am one of those data people. I do like to look at information, but all of those students were a part of the Black Collegians program. So in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, thankfully they're connected with Black Collegians, but how many people in Black Collegians should be connected with the DREAM program that don't have enough information about it? So for me, all things are on deck. I'm telling everybody about what we got. Hope that makes sense.
Thank you so much. So we'll move on to the next question. Anybody want to take a stab at it?
I can answer this one. I mean, I think that when speaking about sharing, validating the experiences, I think, sometimes as a just a woman that's doing this job, sometimes I don't feel like I am really making the impact that I'd like to make on a lot of students' life. And as you're going through this process, no one really kind of gives you a training as to how you're going to better support these students and how you're going to, trying to close the achievement gap. When I first came into this job, I didn't know as much about student services, specifically because I was working outside of student services. I was working more or less with, faculty and other aspects of the community. So I wasn't able to understand what students were going through. So I had to go into a space where I had to talk about my own experience as a former SMC student, a former community college student who struggled a great deal in my education process. Like my whole journey of education was really difficult for me. My foundation of education was very difficult for me growing up in a predominantly white community. And my parents didn't understand that when integrating these spaces, oftentimes as the only Black student in the class, you're ignored, sometimes purposely, sometimes not purposefully. But this happens and it damages your experience on the long term. And so when I first came into the job, I was thinking, well, Jocelyn, you don't necessarily know what to do here. How are you going to change these achievement gaps? And I thought that was a very overwhelming thing. And a lot of times I was feeling like I wasn't doing the job, in the way that's going to be best for students. And what I just started doing was when I went to orientations, I just start being honest. I start telling the stories of what happened to me. And I didn't know where it was going. It was like I was shooting in the dark. But what was interesting is, and what I think was really validating is I've had a student who, it's a Black male, older student coming back to school, has had a lot of struggles, dealt with a lot of discriminatory issues inside of SMC specifically, and I helped him kind of navigate those things. But what was interesting is he approached me via email during the pandemic, and he sends this really long email that he remembered when I did the orientation. This is when we were on campus, and this has been at least probably my first semester, so it was fall 2019. And he says, Jocelyn, you said something about the data specifically of how African-American males are, at the space where we're performing at the lowest rate of all, populations on campus. And that resonated with me. And so every time I am in a classroom and I'm struggling with things, I think about the fact that if I'm able to, pass this class, if I'm able to keep coming to school, that same gap that Jocelyn was talking about is going to close. And that validated me because I was thinking, I didn't know what I was doing during that orientation. I had no idea what I was saying that was actually going to be helpful to these students. So sometimes I think we want to not be human and we want to, be this very professional person. But I think those times when I've taken that risk of being honest and forthcoming about very, personal stories, that is what helps students understand that they can actually make it, regardless of how we think that it makes us very uncomfortable, but it also builds a foundation for students that they didn't have in the past. So that is, the validating experience that I think that I'd like to share today.
Great, thank you so much. Safe spaces, question 4, anybody wanna?
Yeah, I can answer this one. Thank you. So I'll keep it simple. For me, I'm thinking of my role as a math IA with Adelante Black Collegians. I'm thinking back when we were on ground, even in this remote environment. There's definitely 2 things I would do. One, as commonsensical as it may sound, is to employ just basic communication skills, right? So, when you have a student that, first comes into the center for the first time, and, they may look a little lost, they're kind of, asking where the center is, just making eye contact and asking, what their name is, and making sure that they know, what your name is, and asking about their day, asking, what classes they're taking with which professors, and even perhaps, where they're commuting from, and, just basic things like that. It takes about a minute just to chat with them. And a lot of times in my experience, they tend to open up, and without even really asking many questions, they'll begin to share, a little bit about their background, their history with, various classes, various professors, and, they become receptive to the area and to whatever you have to offer. And so, they they'll continue to come back because of that first encounter and that first experience. So that's definitely, one thing I'm always cognizant of. And it's not like I'm going the extra mile. I mean, the same way I interact with our staff, faculty, with our students is the same way I am in my everyday life. So I don't feel like I have to go to school, to campus or online and, turn on a switch. It's pretty much who I am. And so there's that. And the second component is that I try to stay technically proficient in my area. So in this case, it was specifically mathematics. So I'm continuously studying math and continuously trying to find, different avenues of approach and techniques where I can, showcase, different methodologies, different techniques for problem solving. And, then, the students that become confident that you're actually helping them out and then you're answering their questions. And, in my experience in the past 5 years is that, when you do that, again, when you offer a welcoming, open environment and you're actually, again, doing what you're supposed to do and, giving them the resources and answering their questions, they will continue to come back without even, forcefully having to tell them, hey, you need to go to tutoring. Hey, you need to come to workshops, or you need to come do this, come to counseling. They will come back. And, for them, it becomes sort of a home away from home where, many a times it's at the end of the day, it's kind of hard to even like, hey, okay, you got to go home. But so, I mean, I think that's really great that students find that space. But again, for me, it's been those things. It's just basic communication skills and, staying on top of, knowledge in my area.
So can I add a little bit to this just because I want to also just say, I definitely agree with Edwin and Jocelyn in this. As somebody who's usually the quiet guy, it's hard for me to kind of break down that wall and kind of build those connections with students. I think within the last year or so, especially given where we are with COVID, I think that's where I've also learned to kind of break down those walls to have students also connect. As a former EOPS student here at Santa Monica, I'm able to kind of lead with that experience for our students. I think the other thing too, our dean says it all the time that, while we're a community college, SMC runs like a full 4-year university, right? If you look at the quad during our good old days, there's just a lot, and there's a lot of times where a student can get lost, especially given where we are now. So I think the other thing too is making sure that we're checking in on our students, and I know the students that are great at checking in with us and kind of following up, and we're great at doing that, but I think it's also checking in with those students who you haven't heard from. Because that those are the ones that are struggling, and those are the ones that are usually scared to speak up just because of culture differences and the fact that they feel that there's a bit of shame sometimes that comes around with asking for help. I think the other thing too, like everyone was saying, is also just mastering our craft and mastering our resources. So being a resource for our students. So a lot of times I get told I'm the committee king because I try to jump on in every committee I can just to center our students' voices and making sure that our students are valued in those spaces. I'm lucky enough to work in a department where, while I work for EOPS, we also have our foster youth program, so our Guardian Scholars, our DREAM program, our CalWorks program, so working with our single parents. So, I get a wide variety of students with different backgrounds and experiences, and making sure I can bring their voices to those spaces that I can. So, thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Then we have students' motivation. Anybody want? Janet?
Yeah, I'll go ahead. So I think for me, this is especially important because I'm the first point of contact or the first person that that students meet. And so I do this in orientation, and like Aaron, although people don't think I'm quiet, I am pretty quiet, and I'm pretty, I have stage fright, but coming into this college, I realized that I kind of had to step out of my comfort zone. And so I think it's especially important when I meet students to be welcoming and make sure that right away I tell them all of the resources that they have at SMC and why they should be a part of Adelante, especially because, I myself attended, college, right out of high school, and I didn't really have the support. My parents, have an elementary education. And so just being relatable and letting them know about my story, I think goes a very long way. So especially if you want to retain students, you want to make yourself, again, relatable. You want to show that you care. And I think Jocelyn touched on this, that you have to be authentic. And sometimes that means being vulnerable. So I think that is when you're honest with students, that will keep them coming back, I feel. So for me, that's how I motivate students. You know, first impressions are important. And so if I go into an orientation, you know, not really knowing what I'm talking about or not really believing what I'm saying to them, then they're not going to want to join the program. So, you know, that's important.
Thank you so much. And then we have the last question. I'll open it to anybody who wants to answer it.
I can go ahead. So I think, you know, what comes back is, like we said, it's just creating that community and that support and understanding that students have a place that they can go to on campus that's going to help and support them, right? So we also build these relationships with each other, right? So all these panelists I've worked with in some way or another, and I'm constantly, you know, they're sending me students, I'm sending students over their way. And I think that's the best thing, is building a network on this campus for our students, right? Because a lot of times, you know, there's struggles with students. Again, especially for our first generation students, navigating a college process it's never easy, and not knowing where the support is and where the support can come from. So I think it's also building that. So in a sense of helping them, we're also helping them build their own sense of agency that they can for themselves, but also for their peers. You know, I think back to one of the things that we actually did in the fall. So we did an I Am EOPS campaign, where we highlighted a lot of our students and their stories, and we're able to kind of create these kind of montage photographs of our students and talking about their experiences. And you know, what I loved about that too was just we invited the whole college community to come in. So some of you guys remember getting some ice cream and stuff from there, but you know, just the excitement on our students' faces. You know, I always tell them they're big old hams. They were signing autographs on their posters and things like that. But also, again, it's just understanding that people support them and people care about their stories and what they can bring. And I think that's one of the things that we push for in all our special programs, and making sure that we center their voices and what their needs are, and making sure that we're constant. And I think Dr. Frank Harris said this in his speech, that we're constantly evaluating the work that we do and changing and making sure that we're doing that to fit our students' needs, because again, it's never the same needs each time, and we learned that in this pandemic, right? We got to play with a lot of new things, and we got to learn new things for our students. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm gonna throw it back to Tiffany now, but just really quickly, thank you so much for your voices and your vulnerability and your authenticism in this whole presentation.
Thank you all so much. So just to kind of recap some of the core pieces that we talked about regarding or getting from our experts, our panelists, the really important piece of cultural integration, access, validation, creating safe spaces, and student engagement and retention, as it particularly, you know, we particularly speak about our African American and Latinx students. And so the question I pose to all of us today is, how do you plan to cultivate safe spaces for African American and Latinx students' success at SMC? We did want to do a little quick plug on our Equitizing Gateway courses, formerly known as Equitizing Gateway courses training, that we will have in fall 2021, where we'll continue to have in-depth conversations and reflections and ways of incorporating various procedures and policies that can help move our equity forward, to help move us into an equity-minded institution. Go to the next one. And real quick, I did share that we were going to talk about Direct Connect, just to share a little bit. Explore, discover, connect, and thrive. And so Direct Connect is an equity-centered student support navigation portal that addresses holistic student needs. It also highlights a lot of the services that we were just had the great pleasure of hearing about today from the representatives from those various areas. But it's a platform to promote access, resources, and connections to SMC. It was intentionally designed to really support our most vulnerable students. However, it is accessible to all students. It's theory and research based through our holistic student support model, where we really look at the physiological needs of our students, their identity, their safety needs, their esteem and their advocacy, as well as how to move forward in accomplishing their educational, academic, or career goals. We have student support profiles and a holistic master calendar as well. You can go ahead. Currently, it is on Canvas. However, we are creating a Direct Connect SMC website. So some of you may not have heard about it just yet because it has been specifically in DE. However, once we are on an SMC's website, we'll most definitely be promoting and premiering it to all of our other constituents, colleagues who are not on Canvas. But you can see here, these are just a quick screenshots of each of the communities. We have our student counseling, guidance, and resource community, teaching, learning, and growing community, mind, body, and well-being, identity, cultural pride, and self-empowerment, and then a little glimpse of our profile. And where can you find Canvas Direct Connect? Well, you can find it actually on your Canvas. It's your actual banner here. So if you see here, at the bottom here, it's already placed, it's a link. So it's already placed on your toolbar, your left-hand toolbar. And all you have to do is click on it and that beautiful display will show up with Direct Connect. So we do want to, and I'm hoping we have a little bit more, some time. How much time do we have? Let's see. I do want to give some time. I'm sorry.
I think we're over.
Okay, well, if you do have questions, please feel free to either leave them in the chat box or feel free to email me or Silvana. We're more than willing to answer any questions you have. Again, we really wanted to create this as a space and opportunity to begin the dialogue around sense of belonging and creating safe spaces across campus. Again, we want to thank all of our panelists for all of your insight, all of your expertise. We want to continue to have these types of discussions and dialogues throughout campus and throughout the year. And thank you all for coming to our workshop today.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you so much to our panel, who also Direct Connect would not have happened with you guys, without you guys at all. So I just really want to thank you for your time today, for your time that you give to students, to the campus, and all the hard work that you do. So I really want to acknowledge that. And then thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Good program, everybody. I loved it.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
You guys looked great too. Doesn't hurt to say that, huh? Take care.
Thank you.
Miss you. I'm out of here.
Oh, Mariel, thank you for coming.
Oh, you guys did so good. I was so proud. Oh my God. Thank you. Mwah. Awesome job to everybody. Okay. Talk to y'all later.
Bye.
Great job, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.